We began our dig for victory preparations on the evening of Bank Holiday Monday, heading over to Beamish in the car to set up the tents. With the tents up on Monday, we only needed to add the bedding and cooking gear. So while Lynn was working on Tuesday, I packed the Jeep and Dodge, ready to go shortly after 5 p.m. The weather forecast wasn't great for the next few days, but with a new canvas over the center cooking area, we were hopeful we'd be waterproof. Wednesday wasn't a proper show day and no vehicle movements were allowed, so the camp was purely a static display. These pictures show our camp, with several of the group vehicles on show, out of the 7 that were brought out for the event. Wednesday was a relaxing day for chatting and having a look around. The high shots aren't from a drone, but simply a camera tripod held up at arm's length. Neil's Jeep is at the far left, with Paul's and Andy's Jeeps next. My 2 are on the right. Our field shower made another appearance this year. Each time it has been out, it has had slight revisions and improvements. This year, a smaller water container allowed it to heat up much faster. A few other groups also arrived early for the show and were present on Wednesday. That evening, a low loader turned up, and left a while later, carrying an 040 tank engine that has been on loan to the museum over the summer. Each evening, we gathered around the wood burner to stay warm, have a drink and share war stories. Dig for Victory Day 1. Thursday the 31st of August. Thursday morning began with a briefing at 10 a.m., followed by the first convoy of the event. This was to familiarize newcomers with the route around the site seen on this Google view. Lynn took the Jeep while I drove the Dodge. We drove anti-clockwise around the site road, down to the pit village and colliery yard. There is the space to get the convoy turned around here, for a climb back up the pit village bank, to the main site road. This continues a gentle climb to the main entrance, then a slightly steeper descent to the entrance to the 1800s-era part of the museum. From there was a long gentle climb again past the 1950s welfare hall and town, leading back into the 1913 town and back down into the show field. Rather than going back to the show field after the first lap, 4 of our gang continued around the circuit, and dropped back down to the colliery again. There was a location to display near the colliery building, on a walking route between the pit village and 1800s area. We could park up here and have a good number of public walk by. After staying there for a while, we moved on to Coffee Corner, a small parking area on the edge of town, near the bakery, and not far from the cafe. This was a good spot for watching other vehicles convoy by. After Coffee Corner, it was back to camp for a look around some of the other vehicles and displays. There are 2 show fields, with these vehicles being parked up in the same field as our camp. All of the diorama displays were located in the other field, along with some of the larger vehicles. The afternoon convoy was at 3 p.m., and took in the full route around the site, including the pit village. The exit from the steep bank out of the site is a really tight turn. Jeeps could manage the turn, but anything larger had to go the wrong way around the circuit, for about 150 yards. That took them to the bus and tram depot, where there was a hard standing big enough for the largest vehicles to swing around and join onto the back of the Jeep convoy. Soon after the show finished, we went back out for a photoshoot, down at the pit village. It was a squeeze down one of the back lanes for the Dodge, so we sent a scout on foot to check the clearance and turning room at the end. After that, we grabbed some pictures in the colliery yard before moving on to the edge of the 1950s town, which is still under construction. In this area, one street has been completed, while a cinema is being built over the road. A short drive further on brought us into the 1913 town, which was one of the first parts of the museum to be built back in the 1970s. From there, it was back to camp for the evening. Dig for Victory Day 2. Friday the 1st of September. After the morning convoy, we headed back to the colliery for a while. It was overcast and warm, but the rain that was forecast didn't appear. Later in the morning, Lynn was exploring on foot, so I took the Dodge out again, meeting up with Chris and Andy at the colliery yard. It wasn't long before several more vehicles turned up, including a huge Corbitt Wrecker, which I believe is one of only 3 surviving, and the only one outside of the USA. It was starting to look like a car park, so I moved on again and headed back to camp for lunch. Lynn and I were back out in the afternoon, grabbing a few photos on the long climb towards the farm, with the 1913 town in the distance. From there, it was down to the colliery again, meeting up with Paul and Laura. It wasn't long before 2 of the half-tracks turned up. This year, there was a record 4 half-tracks at the show, but I never saw them all parked up together. As well as the main large convoys at noon and 3 p.m., there were several smaller convoys across each day. Sometimes this was a few jeeps, other times, it was perhaps a dozen vehicles. There were always vehicles moving around the site for the public to see. Getting a chance to park up in town was very much good luck. With so many vehicles at the show, time in town was limited to 20 minutes. This was to give everyone a chance for photos, but you never knew whether there was space, until rounding the last corner onto the main street. Later in the afternoon, we began to look around the dioramas, and some of the larger vehicles in the second show field. Partway through, were invited on a half-track ride, so left the rest for another time. The Corbitt Wrecker was also on this convoy, and when we stopped in town, I got chatting with the driver. I'd noticed that it was marked up in 100th Bombardment Group markings, the same as all of my vehicles. It was near the end of the day, so I asked him if he could park in the middle of the field, so I could get my vehicles over for some pictures together. When a Corbitt and Dodge get friendly, they make a baby Jeep. It really is a monster, with the tires being taller than the Dodge fenders. I think my daughter needed oxygen after climbing into the cab. Our group went back out for a ride around that evening. Neil had some running problems, and discovered a small plug in the carburetor was missing. Fortunately, Paul had a carburetor kit with him, having bought it for just 1 screw, so Neil was able to replace the missing plug. After a few more pictures in town, the day ended around the fire again. Check out part 2 of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.